It's a gorgeous sunset. This is an intro to a video by, it used to be on YouTube, it's by Rögnirhar, which he has an X, I believe. This video that I was able to save is called Yggdrasil as a Metaphor for the Folk, and it inspired me to make the videos, the three-part video that I made. But I think you'll enjoy his insight as well. Look at that. If you know where Rögnirhar's other content is, let me know.
Hail folk, welcome to the latest installment of our Heathen Awakening series. Today I'm going to talk about the world tree Yggdrasil, and particularly how I've come to view Yggdrasil. I'm going to start off by reading you Völuspá 19 on Old Norse, and then I'll give you your translation. It reads, Alsk vet ek standa heter Yggdrasil, har bavmer, alsen veite auri, daden komma dakvar, there's idala falla, stander ufergron utar brunir. In English, that's, I know an ash that stands, called Yggdrasil, a high tree, sprinkled with white mud. From there come the dews which fall in the dales, and it stands always green over earth's well. Now, you know, we all hear these stories about the world tree. An interesting fact here is that virtually every single Indo-European mythology has a version of the world tree. It is a main component to our folk mythos. Why is this important? Well, loath as I am to do comparative analysis of other people's myths, there's a statement that says in the Bible that refers to people who convert as being grafted into their tree, and even goes so far as to say that we are a wild bunch, basically. You know, one of the things that we've been confronted with here in the West is that they think that the only sacred text going is the Bible, and so they're completely oblivious to the idea that there are holy books such as the Eddas, such as the Vedas, which tell of this story, but it really doesn't give us a context when we look at what's being said in the Bible and why people go to try to convert and to place themselves into this tree that is not theirs. Well, the interesting thing here is they use the term graft often in Christianity. The interesting thing here is that to graft one branch into another, that means you have to have had a tree. And so what I want to tell you is that we have a tree. We have a very vital tree. And that's what Völuspá 19 was saying. All right? It stands evergreen, and it's always being maintained by the Norns. The Norns are always putting that white mud there to keep us sound and safe until the end, till Rögnirhar. Okay? And so when we think about this, why is this important? It's because Odin himself chose us. In Have 'em All 138, Odin, this is where he talks about sitting or hanging on the tree. He says, Vet ek at ek hek, vindga med i neter aller nu, geri undader, och geven odni, selfen mer, at dem methi, mangi vet, hers af rotum rain. Now, translated in English, he says, I know that I hung on a wind-tossed tree all of nights 9, spear-wounded, and given to Odin, myself to myself, on that tree which no man knows where the roots run. Well, this is very, very important here, because if we were to say that this tree is in fact the folk, then it's Odin is saying that he has placed himself upon the folk. He has put himself there. He has wounded himself, this lower aspect of himself, to his higher aspects of himself. He has made this sacrifice and chosen us to be this thing which he has called his own. And when we think about the creation saga, we think about Midgardr and how we were given the center of the tree. the heart of it, if you will. And that's a very important place when we think about the tree. And so I want to point out the symbolism here that we've been chosen by our gods. And so regardless of what people it is, and I'm not taking anything away from any other peoples out there, I'm not going to engage in some kind of debate. They've been chosen by their gods, whether they want to call their gods Yah, Yahweh, Jehovah, whatever. That's fine. They've been chosen by their God. Okay? They are that God's chosen people. But what I want to tell you is that we are our God's chosen people. We are at the very beginning of our Edda. We are called Helgarkindir, which is the holy people, the holy race. And this is very important, especially when you connect that to this idea of the tree and how Odin chose us to be that thing which he carries and which he resides in. And then as a result, all the gods then reside in this tree. All the ancestors reside in this tree. And so ultimately over time what starts to happen is that man, the folk, become representations of this tree in all its various aspects. We can manifest in many, many different forms as a result of all of the worlds which reside in us as a people. Okay? But what I want to really kind of draw attention to is the fact that we don't have to go out here and attach ourselves to some other tree. Okay? We have a very vibrant and green tree of our own, which is very healthy, and it's being maintained every single day. Now, this isn't something that's new. Okay? Yggdrasil means the horse of Ygr, which is the horse of Odin, if you will. Okay? If we go all the way back to the Vedas, we have the Ashvata, which is the horse tree, literally. Now, why would that be called that? You know, there's a lot of symbolism in what Odin said. He talked about Vindgamedi, that's wind-tossed. Okay? The wind-tossed tree. Vindgamedi, it's wind-tossed tree. Well, when we start going into some of the Vedic writings, particularly the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about how the mind is like a wind-tossed tree. And so this symbolism carries over from the Vedas into the Eddas. And so much was lost when things finally started getting pinned down. I imagine our ancestors were very familiar with these concepts and what was being talked about here. But at the end of that, he says, no man knows where the roots run. That's because the roots run to Allfather himself as our progenitor, as our founder. And in the Vedas, it talks about that the roots run into the very mind of the Creator, of Allfather himself. Okay? And so that's kind of an important factor here. When we look at the symbol of the tree with the 3 arms up and the 3 arms down, that's typically used in the Scandinavian countries to represent Yggdrasil, this is to say is that as above and so below. Okay? Well, we can never really know, based on that symbol, how the tree was situated. But if we go into the Vedic mythology, it talks about how the tree was situated upside down in the cosmos, with those roots running into Allfather, into the mind of the Creator, and that the branches spread outward. Okay? And still, we were given the heart of this. And so, it's important that I pass forward out of this idea that we are a people, that all 11 branches of our folk find themselves in Midgardr having this tree myth that has largely been lost. And yet when they see the idea that has been placed in other people's religious books, they're drawn to it. They're drawn to the idea that they can be adopted into this. But I would ask, why? Why do you need to have something that is not yours? I'm going to take a moment to read something that Allfather said in the Have 'em All, and I'm just going to read it to you in English. Okay, it's Have 'em All 36 and 37. I'm using the Larrington translation. He says, a farm of your own is better, even if small. Everyone's someone at home. Though he has 2 goats in a coarsely roofed house, that is better than begging. Then he goes on to say, a farm of your own is better, even if small. Everyone's someone at home. A man's heart bleeds when he has to beg for every single meal. Well, if we apply this in a spiritual context, if we're going to get our spiritual sustenance from another people, we're begging for our meals, and we don't have to do that. And there's an interesting thing here, is that in the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 3, verse 35, it says, better is one's own dharma, though without merit, than the dharma of another, well performed. Death in one's own dharma is better. The dharma of another is beset with fear. And so when we go and we think about dharma, almost has the exact same meaning as the word sidr, or law, within the Norse tradition. It's faith, custom, tradition, responsibility, law. It's just full of meaning, the word dharma. Okay? Well, if we talk about this farm, we can equate this to the tree. A tree of our own is better than the tree of another. That we can identify with this. We can draw sustenance from it. And those of us who are heathen, we have a very strong attachment to this. As soon as we saw these traditions of our ancestors, we locked on it immediately. We were like, finally something. And so many of us were hunting and seeking for years and years and never were really able to find that desired sustenance for our soul until we found the heathen tradition. Well, we have to assume that there's other people out there who are ready to do that. But how do we get that to happen? And so now I move on to the practical aspects of this. It's important that we're able to actually identify ourselves as a people and say, hey, you know what? I have this thing which I can be proud of. I belong to this. These different branches of our folk. And these are my ancestors. These are our culture. This is our tradition. This is our language. This is our land. The land of my fathers. The lands of my mothers. All right? These are very, very important. As fathers, we can pass this down to our children. Okay? That's kind of our responsibility. You know, whether that's in the form of telling stories and stuff like that. And as the children grow older, we can pass on the ideas of symbolism and participation in that culture. Okay? As mothers, I feel it's even more important. The mother is the first place that the child goes. All right? The child associates more with the mother in the very early years of life, in those formative years. And so mothers, it becomes all the more important for a mother to pass on this sense of belonging and this sense of identity to the child, which they can look and have pride in. And know, well, mom has pride in it. Oh, look, dad has pride in it. And then they themselves don't begin to adopt that guilty thing that seems to be running rampant among the folk. Okay? So by having this pride, I'm not talking about a hate for others. This has nothing to do with other people's. It has to do with us and identifying with what we have as a people. All right? And identifying with our tree and understanding that we are the horse of Odin. We are the vehicle by which the gods manifest in the world. And that's a pretty awesome thing when we think about it. And so I want to encourage you all to really start looking, when you're reading your Eddas, that you look for this symbolism and see how does it apply in a modern context like this. How does it find meaning? Because you know what, these myths have existed for thousands and thousands of years. The fact of the matter is that the Edda, while only written down maybe 1100 years ago, these songs were being told long, long before. Okay, they were just written down then. It was a word of mouth tradition before that. And the same can be said of these Vedas, which descend, you know, in some cases they have astronomical references going back 10, 12,000 BC, according to a Vedic scholar named Subhash Kak, K-A-K. Great, if you look him up online, you can probably find that. He will tell you that, he'll tell you about the origins of these Vedas, and it's phenomenal. Just how old our culture is as a result. And it's something to have pride in and to recognize, oh look, there's our tree. Okay? And so with that, I'm going to close.